The annual launch of a new Call of Duty game has essentially become part of the gamer's, calendar. While the acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft will potentially disrupt the status quo for this long-running franchise, the launch of the latest incarnation of Call of Duty has showed no signs of slowing down. In only the first 3 days of this game's launch, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 has steamrolled to a whopping $800 million in sales, overcoming mediocre campaign reviews and firmly re-establishing this franchise as a juggernaut with few equals in the gaming space.
But in all the hubbub to get this game purchased and installed so they could get started, answering the call, a curious bit of data was revealed that points to an interesting future ahead for not only Call of Duty, but other large titles that are coming to our consoles in the future. Call of Duty titles are always massive games in terms of data size, so it's unsurprising that this one weighs in at over 150 gigabytes of space.
That's a lot of space. That's not very surprising.
Wasn't the first Xbox like 10 gigs?
Well, no, it came with a 20 gigabyte hard drive.
That's right.
The 360. Even like the Xbox One came like with 500 gigs, and then half of that was operating system. So it's not surprising that this is one of the biggest games they've ever made in terms of space. What is surprising is that the physical disc that's inside the retail copy of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 only contains 72 megabytes of data. Yes, you heard that correctly. The disk itself acts as little more than an authentication key that gives the owner of the disk the ability to download the entire game from the internet. The physical disk itself does not contain the game in any way, shape, or form.
So why is this a problem? I mean, most games require a major update prior to launching the game.
Sure,
so why is this mostly empty disk troubling news? I'm asking for a friend.
Okay. A friend that just randomly, like you don't even have your phone on you. How would a friend know? Well, anyway.
I got an Apple Watch.
I guess you do have an Apple Watch.
Texting me right now.
Well, they need to settle down. So this act of selling a disc that doesn't contain any game data on it does set a dangerous precedent, because other fully online titles, like Fortnite, if the studio that's currently supporting that game is either unwilling or unable to do so in the future, the game just disappears. And everything that we've invested into that game disappears along with the game itself. Multiple popular games recently have had their servers shut down, ending the existence of those titles permanently and preventing them from ever being played again by gamers in the future. Every other copy of Call of Duty that any of us have bought you can still play it offline. You can still pop that disc into it. Maybe you can't connect online and play with others, but you could at least play through what was contained on the disc, the campaign. The data that's stored on the disc also ensures that even if the company ceases to exist or no longer supports the game digitally, at least the physical game will still exist in perpetuity. But Modern Warfare 2 does not exist on a disc. Only the means to access it does.
So that means it can only connect us to the source of the game code. It does not actually possess the game code itself. Okay, exactly. I got you.
And that is unfortunately a conundrum I can personally relate to. One of the largest challenges that I've personally faced in my walk of faith is the struggle between acting as a carrier of the Lord's grace or merely a conduit. And while it's certainly true that we do not possess the power to do His work within ourselves without His Spirit empowering us, it's critical that we're full partakers of the grace that He has given us on a daily basis, and not merely empty discs that can point the way to a Christ that we're not currently filled with. Many times I find myself kind of running on empty, attempting to share the Lord with others through a variety of means without actually feeding myself from His fountain as well. And this feeling of spiritual burnout seemed to come suddenly without warning. But the truth is, my internal, the check engine light has simply been glowing red so long, I kind of became accustomed to it. Little by little, I convinced myself that as long as I was still functioning for Christ, I was connected. But like that Call of Duty disc that is virtually empty, except for the connection that it can provide, I was only consuming enough to point others to the way. I was exhausted. I was worn out. If I'm being truly honest, I was even starting to resent the mission a little bit.
If I'm being honest, I have been that same empty disc that the Lord never asked me to be more times than I care to admit, choosing to ignore the provision that the Lord placed directly in my path to consume because I was so bent on performing what He has placed in my heart to do.
In this spiritual place of self-initiated famishment, the reality is that while the Lord will absolutely use us as vessels of His grace to be poured out time and time again, He's also faithful to fill every one of us, as often as we will choose to stop and eat at His table.
Mm-hmm.
As followers of Christ, we all carry within our hearts the great commission that the Lord has called us to. But this incredible responsibility did not come without the addition of supernatural empowerment from the Holy Spirit to fill us up, give us the ability to perform it.
We are not called to be empty, joyless servants of the Lord, acting as mere conduits of His grace to others. We should be overflowing with happiness and joy ourselves, freely tasting the honey that He has provided us in the midst of the battle, like Jonathan did in his battle with the Philistines.
Like those empty Call of Duty discs, we may be able to help connect others to the servers, but we're not merely here to be used as access points.
Mm-hmm.
We are meant to contain this data within ourselves as well. If we find ourselves feeling exhausted, worn out, depleted, empty, and feeling like we're useful but not truly full, it's time to take a break and get filled back up with the same joy, love, and peace that we're connecting others to. Let's taste the honey and enjoy the goodness of the Lord for ourselves.
He commanded us to go and reach others, but He never commanded us to go empty.